Hey, what is going on, podcast people? It is Tyler Bruder back here for yet another amazing episode of Beyond the Broadcast. Hey, welcome back for episode number 6. Man, it's so crazy that we are 6 episodes into this newest venture in my life. It seems like yesterday we just started, which is kind of the case, I guess. But before we get started, I just wanted to thank the first 5 guests I had on the show. Jeff Blankman, Cadeness, and Clayton Van Horn, James Jeffries, and of course, we don't want to forget about, I had them all on the top of my head, T-Money, Tanner Hoops. There we go. I had them all in my head at one point, and then they all just kind of escaped when the camera went on. But thank you so much to the first 5 guests of this podcast. You know, without your support, without your willingness to be on the show, we wouldn't be here on episode number 6. And I can guarantee you these next few episodes are going to rock your socks off. I am so pumped up for next week's episode, but we can't just skip over today's episode because today's episode is quite awesome. I've got another one of my personal media friends, Mr. Joe Pecoraro. He is now doing some digital marketing over at McKendree University in the St. Louis area-ish, give or take. Joe and I got to know each other really well through professional wrestling. We figured out we both love it. We both are so into it. And we just kind of shared that passion and love for pro wrestling and for college athletics and really got to know each other very well. I kid you not, during the Royal Rumble, we were both texting back and forth about what was going on. Jordan Grace had come in during the Women's Royal Rumble. I mean, it was so cool. So Joe is such a phenomenal individual, and despite what he might say, very wise. He's a guy who got his master's degree, so he's only really been out of school for the last year or two, give or take. So he talks a lot about getting that first job right out of college, which can be the hardest, about building a resume, building a portfolio, what you need to do in college in order to look good for that first job out of college. And there's so much that we didn't touch on in this episode that, of course, we're going to talk about in a future episode. My plans are to have him after WrestleMania, so that's about April, give or take. So we're going to try to set up a second interview, talk about some stuff from WrestleMania. We'll touch more upon his life and some other tips and tricks for college students getting ready for the real life. And but this conversation, so great. I think we got like an hour 10 out of him. So I am so excited for y'all to meet Joe. So let's just get right to it. This is episode number 6 of Beyond the Broadcast. And this, my friends, is Joe Pecoraro. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Broadcast. This is going to be such a fun episode. I got a friend of mine who we haven't talked since you betrayed us. You left us. What? I'm just kidding. It's Joe Pecoraro. Oh, Joe, it's been such a long time since I've seen you, man. You're looking good and you sound good, and I can't wait for a talk to you today.
Thank you, man. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invite.
You are welcome. You are welcome. Well, you've got a new job at a university. So excited for you. Why don't you talk a little bit about the position you're doing and what your kind of your daily life looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am at McKendree University, which is a liberal arts college right outside St. Louis in Lebanon, Illinois. It's the oldest university in the state of Illinois, founded in 1828. So a lot of history there. And so, when you're thinking about going into higher ed, money isn't always, the primary motivator, right? There's things there's places you can go in your field, whether, that's marketing. So that's what I'm doing, or communications or HR or whatever, your field might be. If you're going into, the private sector or the corporate sector, you're going to be getting some more money there. But you're doing it because you believe in the mission, or you have an appreciation for the culture that working in education provides. So I work in marketing. So that would involve, some sort of, social media management, PR stuff, ads, all those lovely advertisements you'll see on Facebook promoting a program that, you're probably not interested in, but maybe one or two people are. So that's about my day to day. I work in an old Victorian house. And the university had bought it in sometime in the 70s or 80s. And there's about 6 or 7 rooms, and every room for some reason is wildly decorated. So, there's a mint chocolate chip room that literally looks like a mint chocolate chip ice cream. There's a Harry Potter room downstairs. So it has just a bunch of like coats of arms. Mine is a very, screeching bald eagle patriotic room. And it's also become the home of our beloved mascot, Bogey the Bearcat. So I have a closet in there that I have a sign that says Bogey's room.
Oh my God. So that video that you sent me, was that at your house, or was that his little closet at McKendree?
Yep, that is his closet in my room, my bedroom office, because it was a bedroom that was converted into an office. And so there's a little closet in there, and that's where Bogey lives. And he had, his whole mascots are a lot more expensive than you would think. Like a couple $1,000 type of expensive. And so we had just gotten it, and we need to figure out a place to put it. We were going to put it in the windowsill, so when people were driving by, because we're kind of at the front of campus, when people were driving by, you would just see a big bearcat head in the window of a random house. And we thought maybe that wasn't the best idea. So we gave him a little room. That's where he lives. It's where all of his clothes live. And yeah, so every time I walk into that closet and I forget he's there, I just get 2 piercing mascot eyes staring right back at me.
That is a little concerning. We had our mascot in our office the other day, and it was like his big fur suit was like hanging on one spot, the feet were in another spot, the head was another spot. It is a little jarring at night if you kind of see it.
When you're on that, if you're just sitting in a stadium, or if you're sitting at an event and you see this mascot, it's come to life, and so you're like, okay, like, here, high five, yeah, give you a hug, whatever it is. But when you see the suit separated, and there's just a head and a suit and some shoes, it's very like, you don't know.
I feel like there's a lot of cursed content you could be making on McKendree's TikTok pages of just the mascot head, and like you're in random places. I think that would be what the students actually want on your TikTok page.
Write that down over here. No, we're just starting a TikTok. Being an older place, these aren't things that are unfamiliar to you. Sometimes, you sort of got to claw to get things, for them to embrace new things. And TikTok is something that we have a fantastic creative specialist, and she is she's a content creator in her own right. And she's been sort of building sort of a backlog of content. So there's, about 10 videos or so that we can sort of meter out, so that way there's, when we first introduce, hey, we have this, we can have some content, some really great content pre-built, instead of, just releasing one video and then being like, oh, what are we going to do now? Things like that. So
sure. Yeah. So what has that kind of been like to build that from the ground up? Obviously you have some great help over that McKendree. But obviously starting from ground zero and some of that stuff can be a little difficult. So are you guys kind of releasing that information on other places, other sites, other social media pages?
Yeah. So typically, sort of the core four social media platforms, so that's YouTube, Twitter/X, um, Facebook, and Instagram, and LinkedIn. I guess we'll core five.
Right.
And so the strategy was, and I came in at the tail end of this discussion, was sort of, are we going to create content specific to that platform? Because the content that works on TikTok is not the same content that works on LinkedIn or Facebook, just because you're appealing to different audiences. There's some crossover, especially with that sort of short form content, that swipeable content, becoming a lot more prevalent on, with YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. So there is some level of, you can post on these certain things, but sort of building that content, that was sort of engaging with students, because that's where they're living. Whether that's prospective students or the ones that are on campus now. So, fortunately, we have a great team of student workers who are social media inclined just by, they're, being a college student. So asking them, what do you want to see? Because, I like to think, we're pretty young, but the pace that things move around, it's made me feel very old at my, old age of 25.
Right.
I feel some gray hairs whenever I talk to any of the student workers, and they're talking about things and using words, and I'm like, I was out, 4 years ago I was in college. How have things changed so much so fast? But that was sort of the strategy, was creating content that's going to be appealing to the audience we're wanting it to be, not necessarily a call to action. We're not just trying to sell you something,
right?
At least not directly. But just awareness building.
Yep.
We're here. This is what we do. This is the type of experience that you can have. And I think those sorts of strategies, especially with younger people, are super effective.
And that's one of the things that I'm a little bit afraid of when it comes to some legislation that might be making its way through the U.S. Congress and everything, of banning TikTok, which people have their opinions about, and that's fine. This has become really a platform in which a lot of young people are on, and I guess that's obviously an impressionable bunch, and I get that, but that's any social media site that you go onto. So what's kind of your thoughts on this whole TikTok ban? Because honestly, it's tough to see, but I mean, there's points on both sides. But what do you think about that? Just coming from the field of work that you and I are in with marketing and social media management.
Yeah. Sort of like you were saying, it's tough, and there's, good points to be made on both sides. I don't think, as far as what we do, I don't think if TikTok all of a sudden went away. Does it change our day-to-day? Very much no, because what the content that was, housed on TikTok, that can go to YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, or things that aren't subject to that, that potential, law, that potential bill. So, I like TikTok, but there's states already where public institutions can't use TikTok. Universities that are in those states that were using it just had to stop. And I would like to know whether or not their engagement or their awareness changed any because of that, or if the cost outweighed the benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to ask you because obviously, I think one part we kind of left out of just about you yourself, Joe. You have gotten your master's degree not too long ago. I
Mhm.
think about 2 years
Yeah.
ago at this point.
No.
You worked kind of where we were at. You were there for a year. Now you're at McKendree. You've kind of seen this growth and this change within a short period of time. What's some of
Yeah.
that advice you would give to people just coming out of college that are looking for jobs like yours, whether it's marketing or social media content creation, whether it's within the sphere of a college or university or somewhere else? What are some of those advices of just applying to places and being that best professional that you can be?
College, when you're a student, is great because all you have, at least, all you have time, and you have an ability to take risks, calculated risks, but risks, um, and you can try things. So, when I was in school, I worked in the athletics department at my undergraduate institution, um, and that that experience, I was paid pennies for it, but that led to my graduate assistantship, which paid for my master's degree. I didn't pay for my master's degree. Um, and that graduate assistantship led me to my career. So those, participating in any opportunity you have in your field, because, thankfully in colleges, they're like little towns or like little cities. And with that, they have a little, there's an office of this. If you want to be an accountant, you know, awesome. There's an accounts payable office and there's a business office that I'm sure would love your help. If you're in human resources, there's human resource, there's if you want to be in, sort of nonprofit administration or fundraising, every college in America has a office of development or an office of advancement that would love your help. And those opportunities and will lead to more, if it's not the one that you want right away, it will be, or it might not even be one that you thought you'd want. When I left, when I graduated with my master's degree, I didn't know where I was going to go. I was in athletics, and I thought forever that my bachelor's degree was in sport management. If that tells you how committed I was to intercollegiate athletics, and so I thought that was what I was going to do. But I thought, I needed to try something else. I needed to try the institutional side of communications and marketing. And I found out that was really where I wanted to be. That's where I saw that I could have more impact than I could in athletics. I still love sports, and I'm sure we'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. But I have a different appreciation for it now. And so to students, that would be my biggest piece of advice is anytime that you can help out an office, which they will always appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Very few offices will be like, nope, we don't need your help. Even if you're doing it for free, right? Get that experience, because building that resume outside of the classroom, do well in the classroom, but building that experience outside of the classroom is a game changer when it comes to getting that first job. And that first job is always the hardest job to get.
It is. It's the fact that, especially within like the realm of like content creation or journalism or whatever it might be, to get that portfolio started. That's the biggest piece of advice I give to anyone. I even give it to my students that I have. I say you need to get that portfolio started now, because then your work is going to speak for you. And also, like you said, working within the university and what's on campus and everything like that, you're already building your connections so that people can speak for you. And like you said, that first job is always the hardest. So I want to ask you, because I mean, we have walked different paths. I only have my bachelor's, so obviously
Mhm.
by factors of the institution, you are more intellectual than I am. So
Well, wouldn't
I'm not going to say you're more in debt with me because you got your master's for free, but you have acquired more education than me, thus are more. I don't know. Insert
I
smart
got a
word
second
here.
piece of paper. That's what I got.
There you go. Exactly. So you started your whole career a little bit later, and so not to say you didn't have that quote unquote experience, but you have
Mhm.
drastically changed directions in your life. So when
Yeah.
did this kind of change from you? Obviously, you talked a little bit about it, but just how did you go from where you wanted, what you thought you wanted to do in college, to now what you're doing now, and what were sort of the emotions behind that?
Well, when I was first going into school, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to be like a sports lawyer. Um, and then I sort of looked into it a little bit more and realized law school's hard. And those pre-law classes, and it's a lot of reading, and I'm not a huge, I don't like reading. So, um, sort of figuring out, what I did like to do. And that was to build things, to sort of, get something that was um, not as well developed and alongside other talented people, build it up. Um, and, you know, so I was 17 when I first got into school. So I was fortunate to be a little younger. Um, and that realizing I didn't want to be a lawyer, and sort of talking to some professors I had in my gen eds, um, I was like, hey, this business-ish type, side of things was really appealing to me. Um, and then I was a Pell Grant kid, and so I needing help to afford school. I was in work study, and so my work study job was I was working the front desk in the dorms. So my second semester of my freshman year, um, and I was working 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays, and like every other weekend. And in my head, I was like, oh, like when I first applied for it, I was like, oh, I can just push my day back 4 hours and everything will be great. That ended up not being the case because I was 18 years old in college. Um, and so my second semester, I had this microeconomics class, and it was at 9 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I went to 6 classes that semester. Um, Thankfully, the professor did not take attendance, and we had 2 tests the entire year. So, so I was able to, um, but the next semester, thankfully, I was able to work days, um, and sort of engaging with students. I was like, hey, maybe this is what I want to do. And I was working in sports too, or I was working with the athletics department in communications. And so I was like, this is an industry, intercollegiate athletics. It seemed to marry both of the things I liked, which was engaging with students and sort of advocating for their, needs and their support systems and sports. So that was my path through undergrad. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work in intercollegiate athletics. I'm going to be an athletic director. That was my plan. And then COVID hit, and things just, changed. And I knew that I probably could have gotten work in more normal times than May of 2020 was providing. Um, so I was like, all right, grad school is an option. And so I was like, let's try this. And so I applied everywhere that had positions. So I applied to schools in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
schools in Indiana, and eventually, so I'm from Chicago originally. So an opportunity came across to stay in state. And so I was like, this is perfect. It's everything I need. They had the higher ed program, master's program that I wanted. And I was like, great, this is where I'm going to go. 2 years later rolls around, so I'm almost done with my master's degree. And I'm like, man, looking at, the salaries and the benefits and the time, was this really what I wanted to do? And I'd only ever been at big schools.
Mm-hmm.
Every school I'd ever been to had a university I'd ever been to had about 15,000, 25,000 students. So I wanted to see that change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of been a running theme in my life is always trying to push my own comfort zone. So I was like, let's try this. Let's try something that is more predictable in time, because working in sports broadcasting, you understand this certainly, that, great, there's a softball tournament that's 8 hours a day, 10, 12 hours a day, all weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And, you get stuff, you get to the, complex at 6 a.m. and you're stuck there until 10 o'clock at night. So those sorts of scheduling
Mm-hmm.
things, I was like, is this really what I want to do? And so I was like, let's try this. So going to a liberal arts college of 800 students in a town that I never been to, I was like, let's give this a go. And I did. And now it's like, this feels right. These sorts of places feel right, whether it's the people and the impact that you have. It's different, and it's the value that you put on your time is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And finding that balance of things you want to do and things, whether they pay the bills, and the more you can marry the two together,
Sure.
the better.
Well, and I love the conversation we had recently. I think it was over Twitter or something like that. You had said that you're not worrying about titles or getting the big money, but you're just kind of doing what you need to do. And I think that's a really good advice piece, because I think so many people coming out of college now, especially the younger people now coming through college, who you can call them the iPad generation, whatever you want to call them. But they're very eager to get those higher positions and to really advance through their careers as quickly as possible. So what would you say to those individuals who really want to get this big head start in their career, but don't think about starting smaller with some smaller organizations?
Yeah, I call it title chasing. The really, lofty title, those are so like, you get caught up in it,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you have this master's degree, because you're like, when you first get it and everyone's telling you how great you are, and that only 10% of people in America have this, have this piece of paper that you have, and so you get this sort of unearned feeling that you deserve this, and maybe you do because you worked hard for it, but that this feeling that just because you have this now, that you've earned it, or that you deserve it rather. And so you're like, this is, I don't want this, I want this title, because it pays the most, even though it might not be as fulfilling, even though I might not be ready for it. I want this because this is going to make my pride and my ego feel good. And it's so easy to get caught up in that. And it's something I've gotten caught up in. And it's hard to look at those, it's hard. It's hard to sort of reconcile that in your head that, yeah, you had this, piece of paper, even if it's a bachelor's degree.
Right.
And you want the world and you're ready for it. You might not be. Maybe you are. But it never hurts, especially when you're young, to, thankfully, people aren't relying on you too much, right?
Right.
Hopefully. And, you're able to just focus on you and maybe one other person. But for the most part, you're just focusing on you and your own development, and building yourself up. That's super important. And that took me failing to realize, and hopefully people don't, if you hear this, don't fail. But failure is the best lesson, or the best teacher rather. And so yeah, I think don't title chase, don't paycheck chase. The money will come later, the titles will come later, the responsibilities will come later. Focus on you, get paid your worth, of course. Don't volunteer your time, but filling that you like doing, that makes you feel fulfilled.
Yeah. And of course, it all comes with work-life balance, and it can be hard because, especially with the area that you and I both live in, especially myself in Kansas City, it can be a little bit daunting. It's like, okay, I've got this piece of paper. I'm in a big city. I want to do big city things, but it's, if you have to live in some places. I mean, I lived in an apartment that was a studio apartment for 2.5 years with $650 rent. I mean, there's just times where you gotta live out your 20s with a little bit of not really a chip on your shoulder, but just a sense of optimism that you're going to attain these things over time, and it's just going to take some of that time and a lot of learning to get to that higher position.
And I think with social media, you see all of these success stories of people who are 21 years old and they have $90 billion, because they did this one thing. And you see so many stories, even though they are the slim minority of those stories. It's so easy to look at that and be like, that's what I should be doing. When no, you shouldn't be doing anything. What you should be doing is whatever's best for you at the moment and for your future. You don't know what they did to get to where they are. Maybe they wished on a star and it worked out for them. Maybe they worked really hard and a lot of things fell into place for them. But comparing yourself to other people is so hard, and it's like it's just not. It's going to lead to at best it's going to lead to you being in something that isn't fulfilling to you and doesn't feel right. And at worst, you're going to have some level of imposter syndrome where you're in this and it's like I don't belong here.
And I think there's a lot of that within the content creation world, especially when it comes to comparing your work to someone else. There's a quote that comes to mind, and I'm going to sound at least somewhat intelligent when I say this, so bear with me here.
You always sound intelligent, Tyler.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Hey, if I'm paying for my education, I got to at least use it to somewhat of an ability to continue to learn, right?
Absolutely.
So the quote is, comparison is the thief of joy. And if you're going to continuously put your efforts into comparing yourself to another content creator or social media person, or someone's doing this at your age, you're going to continue to see yourself at this point where it's like, oh, but I'm not as good as this guy. There's always going to be someone better. There's always going to be people making content that looks cooler. But, and there's also a quote from John Cena that I think you'll love too. It's control the controllable. You do what you can do, and you just control what you can control and not worry about anything else that you cannot control, whether it's a job or, whatever. You control what you can control, create what you can create within your limits, and you try to get 1% better each and every single time.
Absolutely. And if we're moving on to the next topic that I think we are, you set that up miraculously.
Kobe 3'd it. I drained it from downtown, boy.
Baller.
I'm 5'7", 5'0". I cannot ball whatsoever. But yeah, let's.
No one's paying for a one-on-one basketball game between you and I.
I sure hope not. If people would pay big money to dunk against me, by all means, posterize me every single time.
You just put your Venmo or your Cash App on the bottom
just
left
put it right here on the bottom.
Yep. Get a 30-second commercial for this.
Yeah, right. Well, let's talk some college sports. You came from, I believe, if not mistaken, your undergrad was at Western Kentucky. Is that right?
Correct.
The Hilltoppers. I love it, man. So,
absolutely.
What's Western Kentucky all about, man? I mean, I think people look at the mascot and it's goofy. Their president's on TikTok. He's awesome. What's Western Kentucky all about, man?
I, coming from Chicago, and moving to Bowling Green, Kentucky, is a switch. I remember my first time that it was my first weekend there, and we had this sort of like camp type of deal, and that was to sort of meet everyone in your cohort, and there are a couple hundred of us. And being a regional school, most people were from Kentucky or Tennessee or West Virginia or Indiana, and here I am. So we're in this, we're at this campground in somewhere in Middle Tennessee, and I was convinced that this was like, I got myself in way too deep, because there was terrible cell reception. The people sounded different, because we're talking about Kentucky here. So I have this funny story. So it was my first night there, and we're just meeting everyone, and I met a couple of people, and I was like, okay, like, you seem cool. And so there was this woman who was there, and I was like, hey, I'm Joe, nice to meet you. And she introduces herself, and I could not tell if she was saying Bailey or Riley, and because the way her accent sounded, it could have been either way. And so I look over to the guy who would eventually become my roommate, and I was like, please help me here. He did not. And so in my head, I'm like, all right, is the coin flip? Let's just give it a go. And I said, Riley? I got it wrong. And her name was Bailey. And I was like, nice meeting you. And I later found out, I think she was from West Virginia. And so my last day there, I was crying to my mom on the phone. I'd found some sort of tucked away area in this forest. And I was like, this, isn't for me. This place, I'm surrounded by trees and, people who sound funny and people who don't have my experiences. And my mom's like, hey, fall breaks in October, right? You can come back home then, we'll talk. But try these first 2 months, because it was like mid-August. Try these first 2 months. And I was like, okay. And there was this like salamander that kind of like skirted away. Terrified me. I had never seen one in real life. And I was like, as tears are pouring down my eyes, I'm looking at this, I'm like, all right, I'll see you in October. And so we go back to WKU, and it was without a doubt the best 4 years of my life. People you meet there, and it was the same value that people get from studying abroad. I got there because culturally it's so different. Yeah, everyone's speaking English, and there's some shared culture there, but it's like the things that I took for granted, as far as like culture, whether that was food or music or just general life experiences. Um, a lot of people had different ones.
Mm-hmm.
I had never been to Waffle House. That sort of experience of the 3 a.m. Waffle House run after a night of good times. Those sorts of experiences, were fantastic. And as far as sports go, I was very, very fortunate. So my introduction to WKU was the Miami Beach Bowl in 2015. And Jeff Brum and the Hilltoppers hung like 55 on the Memphis Tigers or something like that. And they finished in the top 25 that year. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I saw the mascot, Big Red. And I'm like, that's where I want to be. And so I was very fortunate that for the most part, when I was there, I was blessed to have very good sports teams when I was there. They had won a conference title, they won a couple bowl games. They went to the Final Four of the NIT my sophomore year. I went to the Final Four of the NIT. And now they were in Conference USA.
Mm-hmm.
And that conference, more than many others, has faced so much shift in conference realignment. It looks nothing like it did when I was there. And so seeing that, thinking about the conference tournament now, there's 9 teams in Conference USA now. 5 of them are the same as they were when I was going to school there. And I went to school there. I graduated in 2020. So this is not like I graduated in 1987 and, the shift has been so drastic. It's been 3 years. It is so vastly different now. Teams that weren't in there before, now are teams I never heard of are now conference rivals with my beloved Hilltoppers. And so they're the number 3 seed going into this week's tournament, which is going to be in Huntsville, Alabama. And will they win? They're a 3 seed, so it's not impossible.
Sure.
But they started off the season real well. I think they came out 9-0, 9-1, something like that. They were a very strong start to the year. And their head coach, this is his first year. He came from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, who had made the tournament each of the previous 2 years, I believe, out of the Southland Conference. So, high hopes coming into this weekend.
I do want to say this. This is part of the reason why I wanted you on, because you have this vast knowledge of college athletics that I don't think I've seen out of anyone ever before. I mean, I had another broadcaster on who he's also kind of this wealth of knowledge, and I kind of teased this a little bit, and I want to get into this because I think this is the coolest thing about you, is that almost every single team, D1 school, and what conference they're in. So I want to play just a little trivia. I'm on ESPN right now. I'm going to go through some of these teams, and I want you to tell me what conference they are. And if you know what conference they were before this, I don't know what I need to do, but I need to give you some cash because your knowledge is impressive.
Okay.
So was this knowledge just like you're bored one day and you're looking up random like March Madness clips, or when did this love and deep appreciation, I might admit, for college athletics come from?
coming from where I came from, like from where I was raised, Chicago's not a college sports town. Most big cities aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So I what I appreciate is sort of the regionality of it. That you might not be close to. Let's take Iowa for
Right.
example. You might not be close to an NHL or an NFL or an NBA team, but you have 4 D1 teams that you can identify with.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it especially in the South, where those deep ties, those centuries old, my dad was a, Alabama football fan. His dad. Well, those sorts of legacies that you don't see too often. And that you have, especially with college, you have this identification with it. It's very easy to identify with because, like WKU, for instance, I went there. I was a part of it. You can't be or at least most people, you can't be a part of a professional sports team. So it's very hard to identify with it other than it being close to you. But with college sports, it's so easy. And that's why it's so passionate, is because the people who are there identify it's a part of you. And that's why I have always had such a deep appreciation for college athletics. As far as why I know so many of the teams and their conference affiliations, it's a lot of it because of the NCAA video game. Building out, your dynasty, in the Kibby Dome, you're like, oh, okay, these are all the teams in the WAC. These are all the teams in the Big 12, and that just is sort of, as I've been involved with college athletics in different, conferences in different regions, that's sort of become, it's not something it wasn't like I was, doing a Quizlet on, what teams are in the Metro Atlantic, but it just has sort of come to me.
So you obviously played NCAA football before it got wrecked. I think a lot of people are going to miss the Kibby Dome coming up in NCAA 25. I've been tweeting at them for a while.
I've seen it.
Thank you. I'm dedicated to it, man. I'm so dedicated to getting the Kibby Dome into NCAA 25. It's a travesty that it's not. But
it is.
But I got to ask you, what I didn't have the privilege of having like an Xbox or anything like that back in the day. But what was your team in NCAA 14?
This is going to sound interesting.
Okay.
I always used to play as the Miami of Ohio Redhawks.
Really?
Because I thought it was absolutely hysterical that there was a Miami in Ohio. Without understanding the context behind it, I couldn't point at that point. I couldn't have pointed it out on the map. They were national champions 10 years in a row, ran through the MAC. I think they got a Big Ten invite. So I don't think that would happen nowadays. But sure enough, the Miami Redhawks were Big Ten champions for a good while. Really built up that Miami-Ohio State game.
So is Miami going to be your team, Miami of Ohio? Is that going to be your team in NCAA 25? Or are you thinking someone else for a dynasty?
I think I have to pick WKU, right? Just because it's me. But if I want a challenge, I will probably end up going with Sam Houston State, also in Conference USA. Because they're new to FBS. And there is a lot of room for growth at that football program. I just think it'd be very interesting to sort of see, how that's all gonna go. So yeah. Sam Houston and WKU, big Conference USA guy over here.
There we go. Well, you know what? Let's test your knowledge. I've got now. I'm going to go a little bit crazy here because I'm pulling up the NCAA men's teams for D1, so there might be a little crazy ones. But I'm trying to stump you, so that you know what? It's to my benefit. So,
I'm nervous, but I'm.
Let's
Lay it
do
on
it,
me.
man. Let's do it. So I'm going to start here. I'm just going to give you the name of the actual conference, or of the, not the conference, but of the team. You tell me the conference.
Sure.
Let's start out with UC Santa Barbara, the Guachos, or the Guachos, I think is how you say it.
They would be in the Big West.
Oh my God, he got it correct.
I'm gonna tell you why, so don't pick any more of the UCs because all of them, with the exception of UCLA and UC Berkeley, all of the UCs are in the Big West.
Wow.
And most of the Cal states.
Oh my God, you're right. How did I not even notice that? Yeah, UC Davis, UC Irvine, UC Riverside, UC San Diego.
Yep.
Again, this is just showing how much you know. Let's talk about a team that's going D1 here soon. The Delaware Blue Hens.
Where are they at right now?
What conference are they joining? Let's do that one.
They're joining Conference USA. If my memory serves, they are currently in the CAA.
Yeah, the Coastal. Oh my gosh. I'm literally trying to pull. Oh, let's see. Here we go.
I got a couple weak spots.
I maybe. Let's do this. The IUPUI Jaguars.
Guys, well, so funny enough with IUPUI, starting in July, they will be dropping the PU from, so they will just be the IUI or IU Indianapolis, and they are in the Horizon League.
That is correct.
Yep.
I'm trying to think what else I can throw your way. This one might be a little bit tough. This conference had a team in the conference did really well. Let's do this. The Quinnipiac Bobcats.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. They are in I believe they're in the MAC, the MAAC, Metro Atlantic.
Oh, my God, you're right. Wow.
You shouldn't have given me the hint because I'm pretty sure St. Peter's is also in that conference.
That's correct. Marist is in there. Iona. Yep. Typical March Madness runners. Iona are in there as well. Let's throw you one more. Because I think you're pretty much set on anything I throw your way. Let's throw you one. Man, I want to make this a little harder.
Yeah, give me a challenge. Give me a challenge.
Let's see this one. The Long Island University Sharks. Where are they at?
They are... Okay. LIU is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So they're in the Northeast Conference. Oh, but they're...
yeah, they're in that conference, but here's... I love it.
So it used to be they still have two campuses, LIU Brooklyn and LIU Post. And LIU Brooklyn was the D1 team. LIU Post was the D2 team. LIU Post is, I believe, on Long Island, which is where they get the name. So a couple years ago, they merged the athletics departments together. Because they realized it didn't really make a ton of sense for them to have two separate ones. So now they're just LIU, and their basketball team still plays in Brooklyn. Their football team, which used to be D2, now D1, they play. So they have their sports split between both campuses, which is very interesting. That is why I know about it, because it's absolutely fascinating.
That's interesting. Again, your wealth of college athletic knowledge just doesn't seem to run out, and I love that. Well, let's change just quick. I'm only going to keep you for a little bit longer because we're only over. You're giving me so much time. Thank you, Joe. Oh,
it's been fantastic. Give me a couple hours. Let's go to tomorrow.
I don't think there's the two individuals in particular that would be happy about that one, but that's okay.
Probably not.
Probably not. Hey, let's talk pro wrestling, man. You and I bonded a lot over pro wrestling. You got in at a really interesting time. I got into it in a really interesting time. Let's hear your predictions for WrestleMania 40. Of course, that's coming up here in April. Really interesting now that we've got Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins versus Rock and Reigns. What's your prediction on some of these matches, especially that tag team match?
Let's think about how insane that is. This is year of our Lord 2024, and we are talking about The Rock in a tag team match at WrestleMania. So I think it's really interesting how they've booked this. Because when CM Punk came back at Survivor Series, they had set up CM Punk versus Seth Rollins. That was going to be the match for the World Heavyweight Championship. That was going to be it. CM Punk gets hurt. Seth also gets hurt, but So they had to, pivot. And as WWE does, perhaps better than anyone else, they booked themselves into a corner. They booked themselves right back out of it. And, thankfully it worked out that The Rock, joined the board of directors at TKO. So what do I think is going to happen? Here's what I think is going to happen. I think that Rock and Roman will win night one. Get people a little mad. Get people thinking, "Oh no, are they going to do this to Cody again?" Night two, they're going to try to, of course the Bloodline's going to try to, pull their shenanigans. Try to get try to make sure Roman keeps the title. Something will happen. Don't know if Seth's going to come in or whoever. It's a really great opportunity to build someone up. Mm-hmm. Someone who might not, whether that's, someone down from NXT or like that spot of being able to save Cody Rhodes and give him, let him finish the story. I don't know what they're going to do with that. I think Cody does finish the story. Mm-hmm. I think this is the time. And I don't think you can pull this story another year. And I think the stories that the Bloodline are going to write don't need the title to make them more interesting.
Right. I mean, you already kind of have it set up that whatever happens at Mania, you get the fallout with Rock and Roman here, SummerSlam, whatever down the road.
Yes.
Cody can be champion. We've got so many, and you and I have talked about it in length too, privately. There are so many potential stars who could take over, whether, it's Cody or it's Jey Uso or it's LA Knight or it's Sami Zayn. Yes. There's so much. I don't think we've ever had a moment in time, except for the Attitude Era, where there's so many people that could carry the torch and everyone unanimously, for the most part, would be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to the Attitude. So that's, The Rock, Stone Cold, The Undertaker, Mick Foley. Mm-hmm. Now you really do have, and credit to Triple H for booking everyone really great to make sure that you have really 8 to 10 people, men and women, who could carry that torch. Who if you saw them wearing the World Championship or the WWE Championship, you'd be like, okay, this isn't like Jinder Mahal being WWE champion. That never felt right.
No.
So that you have 8 to 10 people who can hold that championship and make it something and make it feel like, that one is a world champion. That makes sense. It's fantastic. There's, at least I don't think in our lifetimes, don't think there's ever been a better time to be a wrestling fan.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think the action in the ring is so great. I think the characters and all the storylines that are leading up to this. I think I told you, but I think this is going to be one of the best WrestleManias we've seen in a very long time. I would say And I don't know if it's going to be true. We're going to wait to see. This might be better than when Stone Cold and The Rock headlined WrestleMania 19. I think it might trounce it if it's good enough and if the quality is there.
I think so. Everyone talks about like the main event that like, and rightfully so, it's the main event. But like we sort of been talking about, top to bottom, whether that's Gunther and an Imperium, the New Day sort of refinding their footing. It seems like that, it looks like they're coming back a little bit. The U.S. title picture, looks pretty wide open.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in NXT? Admittedly, I'm not keeping up with a ton of what's happening on Tuesdays on USA Network, but I've been seeing a lot of clips of Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams. That seems like, and Braun Breaker too. That really seems like again, the whole company, top to bottom, just seems like you could throw anyone in there and they're going to be just absolutely lights out with a story. And I think that's what's going to make this road to WrestleMania over the next couple months, because you do have so many people. You have so many people who you could realistically throw into a match and throw into a story. Who is it going to be? I don't know.
Who knows?
But I'm excited about it.
I do want to say I'm excited for you too, because you just bought tickets to AEW Dynasty, St. Louis Mo. Huge matches are on the card. I mean, we have Bryan Danielson and Ospreay touted for that. We have Okada, who is in AEW. I know that you are in the nosebleeds, but what a moment it's going to be in that building. And I assume it's going to be electric.
So I heard about this, that Full Gear in 2020 or 2021 was supposed to be in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And because of COVID, they had to move it to Daly's Place in Jacksonville, which is where that was sort of AEW's like Thunderdome. Was there's every show for like a year and a half was there. And so like St. Louis traditionally, like, hasn't been an awesome wrestling market as far as attendance goes, but they were supposed to get this event. And so now that they're sort of expanding their pay-per-view repertoire because their roster is getting so big now.
Right.
And there's so many people worth showcasing, because, the people who are, you can appreciate both WWE and AEW for different reasons, right? Like, I think as far as stories go, WWE, like, they have the best writers. But in ring, these sort of, high-flying, very, exciting, sort of heart-pounding matches with high work rate, AEW, that's where you're going to go. And so, I was stunned that Okada debuted the way he did. I thought that was going to be saved for a pay-per-view or something. But to see that happening with the Elite, with Matt and Nick Jackson, or the Young Bucks rather, they were really stale for about a year and a half, and people were just like, oh, like they're washed up, they're old. And so they've really embraced this sort of heel persona. I mean, they were the ones who were in Sting's last match.
Right.
And that a year ago that would have been, it just wouldn't have worked. So, seeing Will Ospreay, the former Sasha Banks, now Mercedes Moné, she's rumored to be debuting. She's going to debut in Boston this coming Wednesday. So there's seeing where AEW is now. I'm very excited at the product that they're showcasing, and that was why for $30 sitting in the nosebleeds, everyone's looking like ants in the ring, but that's why they got the video board, so you can just look up.
What do you think the star rating is going to be with Danielson and Ospreay? Because obviously
Oh my lord.
Ospreay, his last 5 matches have gone 5+ stars. I think his match at Rev Pro was 6.5. I really think not Okada. I think Ospreay, Danielson. I think they get 6 or 6.5 from Dave Meltzer.
You know, there was something I read that a lot of people in AEW, they had heard of Will Ospreay, but they'd never seen him.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all stunned at how talented he was in the ring. And he's 29 years old. I mean, the guy is young. He is in the prime of his career. And to see the types of moves he's pulling off, the types of matches that he's having, and then Bryan Danielson, the man is evergreen. He just will not quit.
No.
I mean, he is just unreal, fantastic in the ring. This is sort of AEW's bread and butter. So that's what AEW is best at. It's these indie darling versus big star power type of matches. You know, WWE is fantastic at these homegrown stars that they bring them in, whether they're old, whether they're ex-college athletes or just people who sound very good on the mic. You know, they take them to their performance center, build them up through NXT. There's a whole system. AEW is these, people who were fantastic on the indies, or they were ex-WWE people who, for one reason or another, just, the way they were working just wasn't the way that, WWE was working. Those sorts of matches that you want to see and that people were really wanting. That's what AEW, like that was the void that AEW was filling. And so being able to see that live, I've never been to an AEW show. So seeing that live, it's actually been 20 years since I've been to a wrestling show. I went to Raw from Allstate Arena in 2005, 2006.
Wow.
I had the belt.
Oh, man.
I had the John Cena spinner belt. And it was John Cena against Shawn Michaels. And believe it or not, John Cena took the pin that night. Shawn Michaels with the Sweet Chin music.
Mm-hmm.
And you heard it. You heard it throughout the building. And it was like, and of course, I was like 5 or 6 years old. I was like, how dare you? Why did you beat him? I love John Cena. I had his autograph. I even had his hat, the camouflage hat. I had the whole setup. So it'll be interesting, because I sort of fell out with wrestling for a long time. I only really gotten back into wrestling over the last couple of years. And so this will be the first time since I've grown up and realized that, these fine people aren't, taking out their actual real world frustrations.
Right.
Undertaker doesn't actually solve his problems with a tombstone pile driver.
I will say the one event that of course I went to is because of you, and I got to thank you live on camera for that. Thank you for that. On top of that, the funny moment that happened, I think I sent you a text. It was Minoru Suzuki versus oh gosh, who's the big guy? Oh god, Eddie Kingston. There we go. It was.
Oh man.
It was that match on Dynamite, and Hannah looks over to me and she's like, I'm a mandatory reporter and this looks like elder abuse. I'm like, you're not, because here's Eddie Kingston chopping the hell out of Suzuki in the freaking corner. You can hear all the slaps and the chops, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I am bringing my girlfriend who loathes wrestling. She does not like it. Won't watch or doesn't watch it. Sometimes I have to force her to. And I was like, hey, we've got to go to this event. It's going to be here. I've been meaning to go to one of these shows. We got to go together. And so she was like, fine. I have to do her laundry until the end of April. But she's going.
Worth it. Worth it.
And I think so, because I wasn't going to go alone. But no, I'm so excited for it. I'm excited to see wrestling be what it is now. That it's becoming, more common conversation. That it hasn't been for a long time. I mean, the fact that you have two separate companies putting on fantastic shows and getting crowds, that competition's forcing everyone to be better. Because I think, you've seen since AEW has come onto the scene, WWE has absolutely improved their quality. Because, 2017, 16, 18 WWE was very stale. It was just sort of like,
yeah,
the stories, blame whoever you'd like to on that, but competition makes it, people better. And I'm glad that we are in a place now where we can have two wrestling companies that are putting on fantastic shows. It's fantastic. I'm excited for WrestleMania. I think it's going to be, I've always wanted to go to WrestleMania, but those tickets, I mean, I don't understand. Like, sometimes I'll just look at them. I just wanted to see if you wanted to be on the guardrail at WrestleMania, it was something for just one of the nights, it was like $30,000.
Yep. And Brock Lesnar guy's probably going to be there anyways.
Of course. Doesn't matter if it's a house show,
dude,
in Peoria, Illinois.
I suggest anyone go back and look at the history of Brock Lesnar guy, and you will start to see him everywhere. Even if it's a hallucination of him, he's going to be there. And I know that name is, redacted guy, whatever you want to call him at this point. Brock Lesnar guy is going to be there in the flesh, and you're going to see him with that same t-shirt he had on back in 2012, and it's impressive. I don't know what kind of money he has, but it's kind of impressive.
It's someone's got to, I'm surprised someone doesn't sponsor him.
They have to. It's like Slim Jim, Jack Links, somebody. Dude, go full Brock Lesnar and have Jack Links sponsor him. Give him a new t-shirt. He needs to wash that thing, man.
Mountain Dew pitch black match.
There we go. Perfect. Well, Joe, I'm so excited to see photos from AEW Dynasty. Of course, we'll probably be talking during WrestleMania season when WrestleMania happens. And thank you for your time, man. You an hour and 10-minute episode. And thank you so much for spending your time with me.
Of course. Thank you for having me, man. It's exciting to, whether it's, to be able to talk about whether it's my story, how I, got where I am, or just the things that, you and I are both interested in, just having a really great conversation. I'm excited for you, to see this podcast grow for you.
Thank you.
Seeing a couple of the episodes, I mean, it's sky's the limit, and I'll be glad to be able to say I knew you when.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, when WrestleMania gets done, we'll have to record another episode, talk about those results, and just do what we do and talk wrestling, man.
I'll be honored.
Perfect. Well, hey, Joe Pecoraro. I'm going to get your name, not Pecorico, not Pecoraro, Pecoraro. I'm going to get it right.
You're one of the few who gets it right.
Absolutely right. Hey, that's my job, man. That's my job. Well, Joe, thank you so much for being on here, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Man, what a fantastic conversation with my dear friend, Joe Pecoraro. Do got to say, I messed up his name one time. I think I called him Joe Pecorico, and I regret it dearly. So, Joe, if you're listening, I'm sorry. It is Pecoraro. That's how you say it. It's spelled a little differently. If people get my last name wrong, I get it. I get it. And, there's nothing more important than a person's name. So another professional tip for you, just as we're giving out all these tips, just make sure that you get people's names right. Look them up, try to find interviews if they're, a higher managerial person. Just try to get their name right or ask someone that knows about them. And that'll mean the most to them, that you know their name, you know them by a first name and maybe even last name basis, and you know how to say it correctly. That's always just a courteous thing I try to do when I'm meeting new people. Sorry, I bumped my mic there. Man, what a conversation. Man, Joe is such a kind, awesome guy. We share so much together when it comes to pro wrestling. We've been texting probably for the last month or so. We've been texting back and forth about what's been going on in AEW and WWE, and it's he's just such a really cool friend. So make sure you go down below, give him some love on social media, and let us know that you've been listening to the podcast. One of the most crucial things you can do to help us grow this podcast is just sharing out the podcast by following the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on right now. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us. We've got a whole lot more in the pipeline. Of course, I'm doing my best to try to juggle normal job and this, so I know some of the clips that I've promised haven't been quite delivered yet, but they are getting there. I've got some time coming up here soon that I'll be able to put those all together, so I'm so excited to put together some clips from these past 6 episodes, throw them up on YouTube, and hopefully some more listeners will come here to the podcast. So those are coming up here soon. I'll get those out to TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, wherever the little short form content stuff can be. I'm going to put it up on there for your enjoyment. Next week, man, we got such a special guest. Probably one of the biggest guests I've had on the show. And this guy has been so gracious with his time. Next week, we are talking with James Beard. And by normal circumstances, you probably never have heard of this name. James Beard is a longtime pro wrestling referee. He's been over in Japan. By his knowledge, he is the only American-born guy to go over to Japan and have a full-time refereeing gig, not just for a tour, but actually working for a company over in Japan. And most recently, James has, written a book. He's writing a second book, which I cannot wait for. And for the third thing, he was heavily involved in the movie The Iron Claw. Yeah, we're talking to a real movie star here. He was the referee with the big handlebar mustache in The Iron Claw, and he was also responsible for helping some of the talent to really personify the people and really live the way that the people in real life were. So, the Von Erichs and Ric Flair and all these guys. So he was really responsible for giving that historical touch to the Iron Claw. And of course, it's not a documentary. It's based on a real story, but it's not a documentary or anything like that. So some of the things in the Iron Claw are fake, and he talks about it in our interview there. But man, what a great conversation we're going to have with James Beard next week. Cannot wait for you to listen to it. You won't want to miss it. So again, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms. And also, you follow the show here on your preferred podcast platform and leave us a review. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Beyond the Broadcast. Be great, be awesome, but don't forget to go beyond. My name is Tyler Bruner, and my friends, we will see you next Friday on Beyond the Broadcast. We'll see you later.